The galaxy's most powerful civilizations had been content in their eternal dance, diplomacy, trade, and war conducted with the same precision they had perfected over millennia. But all of it, everything they had ever known, shattered in a single, horrifying instant. It happened when Earth fired first, asterisk. It wasn't supposed to happen this way. Humanity had been invited to the Galactic Council under the premise of peace, their advanced technology and potential seen as a gift to the universe. But when the Zelvori fleet, once thought peaceful and diplomatic, launched a sudden and unexpected assault on Earth's colonies, the humans responded in a way no one anticipated. They retaliated with devastating force. The attack that followed wasn't just a battle. It was a revolution, a redefinition of what it meant to be a power in the galaxy. Ambassador Sarah Templar watched the briefing room's holographic display flicker to life, showing the remnants of what had once been the Zelvori command ship. The image was silent, but the devastation spoke volumes. Entire fleets had been wiped out in a matter of hours. Earth had not just defended itself, they had sent a message. Counselor Varnak. Sarah's voice broke the tense silence as she turned to the Zelvori representative, who sat across from her, eyes narrowed, jaw tight. I assure you, Earth did not seek war. But we will not stand by while our colonies are targeted. Varnak, his pale blue skin shimmering faintly under the council chamber lights, held her gaze for a long moment. His species was known for their calm demeanor, their obsession with balance and reason. But now, there was only fury in his eyes. Your actions have disrupted everything, he growled, his voice low but unmistakably dangerous. You've opened a wound in galactic diplomacy that may never heal. Sarah's throat tightened. She had expected this, expected anger, but not this raw, venomous hatred. She had been chosen to represent humanity in a moment of crisis, and the stakes had never been higher. The Galactic Council was a delicate construct of civilizations, each with their own agenda. The Aslaki, known for their technological prowess, the Zarthi, diplomatic and powerful, the SHNAK, warriors who respected nothing but strength, and many others, all had their place. But humanity was a wild card, a species that had been forged in the fires of war and perseverance, not in the sterile halls of galactic councils. And it was this unpredictability that now drew the eyes of the galaxy upon them. Ambassador Templar, Varnak said slowly, I cannot speak for the entire council, but I know many here are already discussing the possibility of sanctions. Your people have shown that they are not just capable of defending themselves, they have the means to reshape the entire balance of power in the galaxy. That's not our intention, Sarah replied quickly. We seek peace, but we will never allow our people to be harmed without consequence. Her words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Earth's response had been swift, brutal, and perhaps unnecessary, but it was clear that no one could ignore it. They had become a force to be reckoned with, whether they wanted to or not. An unprecedented response, Counselor Liriana of the Zarthi added, her soft voice cutting through the tension. And yet, it's impossible to ignore the fact that humanity has now redefined the very nature of conflict in the galaxy. What was once seen as a threat is now viewed with a mix of awe and fear. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest. The Zarthi had always been the middle ground in galactic politics, diplomatic, but with a deep understanding of power. Their words carried weight, and if they were acknowledging humanity's place in the equation, the ramifications were far-reaching. Counselor Liriana speaks truth, added Counselor Varnak, his expression tight with reluctant admiration. But we cannot allow this to go unchallenged. The galaxy has existed for millennia without such rash decisions. This cannot be allowed to set a precedent. Sarah glanced around the chamber. Every counselor had their eyes fixed on her. The eyes of the galaxy were upon humanity now, and they demanded answers. Her heart was still pounding, but she held her ground. She knew the risks, knew that this moment would define humanity's place in the galaxy. The question now was simple. Could they survive the scrutiny of a galaxy that feared and envied them all at once? As the murmurs of dissent began to ripple through the room, Sarah made her decision. Then let it be clear. Humanity will not be pushed aside or coerced. We will meet aggression with force, but we will negotiate for peace if given the chance. A silence descended on the chamber. The future of humanity's place in the galaxy hung in the balance, and Sarah had just placed her stake in the ground. The galaxy would never be the same again. The galaxy, it seemed, was teetering on the edge of collapse, and humanity had just become the fulcrum. Sarah Templar sat at the edge of the Galactic Council's table, feeling the weight of every set of eyes fixed on her. The silence was deafening. The threat of war hung in the air like a storm cloud, but the counselors were all waiting for the human ambassador to offer something more than defiance. She had made her stand, but now the question was, what next? The Zelvori, once the epitome of diplomacy, glared at her from across the table. Their reputation as master negotiators meant little when their fleets had been obliterated. The SHNAK, who valued power above all, hadn't yet spoken, but their body language was unmistakable. Tensions were rising. Sarah could feel it in her bones. The galaxy was on the brink of chaos, and humanity had just been thrust into the eye of the storm. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Humans had been invited to the council as guests, offering their cutting-edge technology and fresh perspective. But one brutal retaliation had shattered that illusion. Now, Earth was seen as a force to be reckoned with, and no one was quite sure whether to fear or respect them. Ambassador Templar, said a voice breaking through the tension. Counselor Liriana, her smooth Zarthi features softened by a rare flicker of empathy, leaned forward. It is clear that Earth's response to the Zelvori was swift. But how do you intend to navigate this? Your people's actions have disturbed the equilibrium we have maintained for eons. Sarah took a deep breath. We acted in defense, but Earth's intentions remain peaceful, she said. Our focus is diplomacy, peaceful negotiations, as long as we're given the opportunity to negotiate. There was a long pause. The Zarthi were always the mediators, the ones who kept things balanced. If they were skeptical, then the others would follow suit. And then, as if to remind everyone of the stakes, the doors to the council chamber slid open. A figure entered, tall, imposing, and draped in the neutral-toned robes of the Varthal. Sarah stiffened. The Varthal had been a mystery for centuries, a species known for their unparalleled skills in negotiation, and even more famous for their complete neutrality in galactic politics. They didn't align with anyone, didn't take sides in conflict. They were observers, arbiters, and their opinion was worth more than any weapon or fleet. The figure, a high-ranking Varthal diplomat named Alanthar, moved toward the table. His every step seemed measured, deliberate. As he seated himself, the room grew quieter, if that was even possible. Counselor Alanthar, Sarah began, attempting to hide the edge in her voice. I wasn't expecting you to intervene. I'm not here to intervene, Alanthar replied, his deep voice cutting through the silence like a blade. I am here to offer an opportunity. Sarah raised an eyebrow, her gaze locking with the Varthal representative. An opportunity? Alanthar's eyes gleamed. The galaxy is on the precipice of war, and you, Ambassador Templar, have unwittingly pushed it closer to the edge. But I do not think that was your intention. And despite what others may say about your people, I believe humanity has something unique to offer. Sarah didn't trust him. No one trusted the Varthal. They had no allegiances, no alliances. They were the perfect middlemen, but only because they avoided taking a side in anything. And now here they were offering humanity something. But what? You would ally with us? Sarah asked cautiously. Alanthar nodded, but it wasn't a gesture of friendly diplomacy. It was a calculated decision. Not ally, he corrected. We would offer you the means to navigate this crisis. The Varthal have observed the behavior of the other council members. They are afraid of your power, Ambassador, and they will try to push you into a corner. You will need strength, yes, but also wisdom. A balance only we can offer. Sarah studied him, weighing his words. And what do you want in return? The Varthal didn't do favors without a price. Nothing was ever free in the galaxy, especially not when it came to power. But Alanthar's answer came with the eerie calm of someone who had already calculated the risk. Your trust, he said. Humanity will need to understand that your path forward lies in something greater than military might. The galaxy does not bow to power alone. It bows to those who can see the greater picture. We will teach you to see it. The room fell silent. The offer was tempting, almost too tempting. A species with no ties to anyone else, willing to help humanity avoid war and guide them through the political turmoil that was fast approaching. But there was one question that gnawed at Sarah. And if we refuse? Alanthar's gaze darkened slightly. Then you will face the full force of the Council, and perhaps the galaxy itself. The room was still, and Sarah could feel the weight of the choice settling on her shoulders. The Varthal were dangerous, but not because they were warriors. Their power lay in their knowledge, in their ability to navigate the storm of galactic politics. She had always believed in diplomacy, but this was different. Earth's future depended on decisions that could change everything. Let's talk, Sarah said, her voice steady. We'll listen. The Varthal's lips twitched into what could only be described as the galaxy was a stage, and humanity was now the unpredictable actor that everyone feared. Sarah Templar's gaze swept across the bustling Galactic Council chamber, the usual hum of diplomatic chatter now overshadowed by an undercurrent of suspicion. After the Varthal's unexpected offer of guidance, the stakes had only grown higher. Earth's future was no longer just a matter of survival, it was a question of power, and how quickly humanity could claim it. But there was something else at play, something Sarah hadn't anticipated. The Nova Syndicate. At first, they were nothing more than whispers, rumors circulating through the galactic underworld. An unknown faction, presumed to be human, advocating for a radical overhaul of the galaxy's power structures. They believed the old ways, diplomacy, balance, power by committee, had failed. Instead, they pushed for something more radical, a new order, one where humanity took center stage. Sarah frowned as the image of the Syndicate's encrypted message blinked to life on her comm screen. It was a reminder of how deeply Earth's sudden rise had unsettled the galaxy. While most saw it as a threat to the status quo, others, like the Syndicate, saw an opportunity to exploit humanity's raw ambition and strength. What do we know about them? Sarah asked, addressing the room of military and intelligence officials gathered in her temporary office on the Council ship. We know they've infiltrated several systems, but there's little concrete evidence, Commander Tyron replied. His face was grim, a rare expression for a man whose job was to deal with threats head-on. What we do know is that they're actively undermining diplomatic efforts and trying to rally support for their vision of a human-dominated galaxy. The door to the office slid open, and Sarah's aide, Lieutenant Kira, entered swiftly. Her expression was tense, and she handed over a fresh report. You need to see this, she said, her voice low. The report detailed a series of intercepted transmissions between various syndicate cells across the galaxy, including one with a known Zelvori sympathizer. They were planning something, a bold move to destabilize the current political system. Sarah's instincts screamed that it was only a matter of time before their influence spread, maybe even to the Galactic Council itself. Great, Sarah muttered, as if things weren't complicated enough. A voice from across the room cut through the tension. Humanity has always been known for its innovation, Ambassador, said Varnak, the Zelvori counselor, his blue eyes narrowing. But this is a different beast. You're about to face something you're not prepared for. Sarah looked up, meeting Varnak's gaze. Don't worry about humanity, counselor. We've survived far worse. He nodded, though his expression remained unreadable. It's not humanity I worry about, Ambassador. It's your outliers. The Syndicate could destroy the fragile peace you've worked so hard to build. And that's exactly what they want. The words stung, but they were true. As Earth's political presence grew, so did its enemies. And while the Varthal had promised guidance, Sarah had no illusions that their motives were entirely pure. The Varthal's neutrality was their strength, but it also meant they had little stake in preventing the Syndicate's rise. Sarah leaned back in her chair, the weight of her decisions settling on her shoulders. What the Syndicate wanted was clear: a galaxy where Earth called the shots, where force ruled and diplomacy was a distant memory. But what they didn't realize was that humanity, for all its flaws, had the ability to adapt. And that was its greatest strength. "We need to act," Sarah said, her voice firm. "If the Syndicate's influence grows unchecked, we're no better than the warlords of old. We can't let that happen." Commander Tyron stepped forward. "I recommend a show of strength. We need to send a message, a military operation, to neutralize the Syndicate's main base." Sarah thought for a moment. A military response was tempting, but it was too risky. The Council would never accept it, not without consequences. There was a more subtle way, one that could allow them to maintain control without escalating the conflict further. But it would require trust in allies who were far from dependable. "Not yet," she replied, her mind already working through the possibilities. "We need information. Let's infiltrate the Syndicate's ranks and learn their true goals. Once we know what they're planning, we'll take action." The room fell silent. It was a dangerous move, and everyone in the room knew it. But Sarah had no choice. The galaxy was watching, and humanity's path was far from clear. One misstep could lead them down a road they wouldn't be able to return from. As she dismissed the meeting, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that, somewhere deep in the shadows, the Syndicate was already watching. And soon they would make their move. The galaxy, it seemed, was a storm, endless, unpredictable, and on the verge of breaking. Sarah Templar stood before the holographic map of the galaxy, her eyes scanning the shifting tides of galactic politics. The Galactic Council, once a stable institution built on diplomacy and balance, was fracturing. And at the center of the chaos was Earth, caught between old alliances, new threats, and the insidious rise of the Nova Syndicate. She ran a hand through her hair, trying to push past the fatigue that had settled into her bones. The Syndicate was no longer just an underground faction. Its influence had spread like wildfire, infiltrating galactic systems, stirring unrest among the lesser-known species, and undermining the fragile peace humanity had worked so hard to establish. "It's spreading faster than we anticipated." Commander Tyron's voice broke the silence. His image flickered into the room, his stern expression mirroring Sarah's concern. "The Syndicate cells have already gained support from several smaller factions, worlds that have always been on the fringe of galactic politics. They're seeing this as an opportunity to break away from the Council's influence." Sarah exhaled sharply, her gaze fixed on the blinking red lights scattered across the map. The Syndicate was using humanity's rise as a rallying cry for those disillusioned with the old powers. It wasn't just a political movement anymore, it was a rebellion that could tip the galaxy into chaos. "We can't let this get out of control," Sarah muttered, more to herself than to Tyron. "If the Syndicate gains enough support, we'll have a civil war on our hands. And once that happens, the Galactic Council will fracture beyond repair." "I agree," Tyron said, his voice tight. "But we have limited options. We could mobilize the fleet, strike at the heart of the Syndicate's operation. But that's risky. It would show the galaxy we're afraid of a few insurgents, and that would only fuel their cause." The room fell into a heavy silence. Sarah's mind raced, weighing the options. A military strike would be a mistake. It would escalate the conflict, painting humanity as the aggressor in a galaxy already on edge. Yet, if they didn't act soon, the Syndicate's vision of a human-dominated galaxy would become a reality. A vision that, though tempting to some, would tear apart everything humanity had fought for. "We need to send a message," Sarah said finally, her voice firm with resolve. "But not with weapons. We need to show the galaxy that humanity isn't a threat, that we stand for unity, not division." Tyron raised an eyebrow. "How do you propose we do that?" Sarah turned to face the holographic map once more, her finger hovering over the symbol of the Galactic Council's headquarters. "We'll have to outmaneuver them. We use diplomacy, yes, diplomacy, but with an edge. We go to the heart of the Syndicate's support base. We engage their leaders in public discourse, expose their true intentions for what they are, chaos and division." "Expose them?" Tyron asked, How do we do that without appearing weak? Sarah smiled, a cold glint in her eyes. We show the galaxy that humanity doesn't need violence to command respect. We expose the syndicate as nothing more than opportunists, using our rise to further their own agenda. But we do it with the weight of the council behind us. We'll turn the syndicate's message against them, force them to back down without firing a single shot. Tyron was silent for a moment, clearly weighing the strategy. Finally, he nodded. It's risky, but it might just work. If we can get the council to back us, the syndicate will lose their foothold. Sarah's heart raced. This was it. The gamble that could either save or destroy everything. Humanity's place in the galaxy wasn't guaranteed, and the syndicate had made sure of that. But there was one thing Sarah knew for certain. Humanity was nothing if not resilient. And this time, they wouldn't let the galaxy crumble under the weight of their own ambition. We move quickly, she said, her voice steady. Get the council on our side. If we can expose the syndicate for what they are, we'll pull the rug out from under them. We have one shot at this. As the meeting ended and the holograms flickered out, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that the galaxy was already slipping through her fingers. The tides were shifting, and there was no telling which way they would break. But one thing was clear: humanity would not go down without a fight. The galaxy had underestimated them once. It would not make that mistake again. Power, once attained, is never easily surrendered, especially when it comes at a cost. Asterisk. Sarah Templar stood at the edge of the Galactic Council's observation deck, watching the stars streak by as the Council ship cruised silently through deep space. The weight of her decisions pressed down on her like a physical force. The syndicate was gaining momentum, and Earth's place in the galaxy hung in the balance. But it wasn't just the syndicate anymore. Something darker was taking shape, something she hadn't anticipated. The Council had agreed to her plan: expose the syndicate, turn the galaxy against them. But as Sarah had expected, political forces had their own agendas. Allies had become distant, opponents more vocal. Every move she made now was under intense scrutiny. It was as if the galaxy was holding its breath, waiting to see whether humanity would prove to be a force for peace or for destruction. "Ambassador," came a voice behind her. It was Counselor Liriana of the Zarthi, her smooth, almost metallic features glowing softly in the dim light. "You've done it. The syndicate is under investigation, and support for them is waning." Sarah turned to face the Zarthi diplomat, though the small spark of hope in Liriana's voice barely registered. "For now," Sarah replied, her voice tight. "But it's not enough. The syndicate is nothing without their supporters. And they won't just vanish." Liriana raised an eyebrow. "You think they'll fight back?" "They already are," Sarah said, her mind racing. "I've seen the reports, an uprising in the outer systems. Rebels rallying under the syndicate's banner, calling for humanity to claim its place as the dominant force in the galaxy. We can't afford to let this go on much longer." Liriana's expression softened, and she took a step closer. "Then what's the plan, Ambassador? You can't continue to play this game forever." Sarah's eyes narrowed. "I know," she muttered, "and I can't rely on diplomacy alone anymore. We need to show the galaxy that we will defend our position. That Earth's power is not just a political ideal, it's a force that must be respected." A heavy silence fell between them. Liriana had known what Sarah was about to say. The galaxy's political games had been fought on terms of subtlety, of compromise. But Sarah was beginning to understand that there were no easy paths forward. The syndicate was an army of insurgents, but their true strength lay in their ability to exploit the gaps in the Council's power. "You're considering military action," Liriana observed quietly, her tone measured. Sarah hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "I have no choice. We can't keep talking while the galaxy burns. But if we take action, the consequences will be far-reaching. We'll become the aggressor, and the entire galaxy will see us as a threat, not a savior." Liriana was silent for a long moment. "The price of power is steep," she said softly. "And once you've crossed that line, you may never come back." Sarah's gaze hardened. "I understand that. But if we don't act now, we risk losing everything. Her mind raced through the choices ahead. A military operation would send a message to the Syndicate, but it would also shift the balance of power irrevocably. Once Earth took that step, there would be no turning back. The galaxy would either rally to their cause or turn against them in fear. "Have you spoken to the Varthal?" Liriana asked, her voice low. "Not yet," Sarah replied, her thoughts turning to the neutral faction. The Varthal had been helpful so far, offering guidance without taking sides. But their influence was growing, and Sarah needed them more than ever. "I recommend you do," Liriana said. "The Varthal may be the only ones who can broker a resolution without bloodshed. But I fear they too are caught in the tide. They may choose neutrality, but neutrality can be a weapon in itself." Sarah knew Liriana was right. The Varthal were the key to maintaining balance in the galaxy. But if they sided with the Syndicate, or if they remained neutral, it would spell disaster for Earth. The stakes were higher than ever. A sharp chime interrupted her thoughts. The communication terminal blinked to life. "Ambassador Templar," came a voice urgent. "You need to see this." Sarah's heart skipped a beat as she rushed to the terminal, her pulse quickening. The screen flickered, revealing a live feed from Earth's outer colonies. A fleet of ships, unmistakably Syndicate, was massing near the border. It was happening. The Syndicate was mobilizing. And Earth's window for diplomacy was closing fast. "Get me the Council," Sarah said, her voice firm. "It's time for the galaxy to choose." The galaxy had been on the edge for too long, and now it would either rise or burn, asterisk. Sarah Templar stood before the window of the Council's flagship, the stars stretching out before her like an endless expanse. For the first time in weeks, there was no immediate threat looming over her. The Syndicate's forces had been driven back, their influence weakening after their failed uprising. But the true test had just begun. The stakes were higher now than ever before. Peace had never been so fragile, nor so necessary. "Ambassador," Commander Tyron's voice cut through her thoughts. "The Varthal are ready to meet with us." Sarah's pulse quickened at the mention of the Varthal. They had remained neutral through the crisis, offering their advice, but not fully aligning themselves with Earth. Their position had always been one of quiet power, a neutral faction with influence over both sides of any conflict. If they agreed to back humanity, it would be a significant turning point. "Bring them in," she said, her voice steady despite the uncertainty swirling inside her. The doors to her chamber slid open, and the Varthal delegate, Alanthar, stepped in. His tall, regal figure glided forward, his glowing robes reflecting the faint light from the stars outside. There was no warmth in his expression, no overt friendliness, just a calm assurance that had made the Varthal such formidable players in galactic politics. "Ambassador Templar," Alanthar greeted her with a slight bow. "The situation has become volatile. We have seen how Earth is navigating the storm. But the question remains, what path will you choose next?" Sarah knew what was at stake here. The Varthal's decision would either stabilize the galaxy or plunge it into an even greater conflict. "We've already shown the galaxy that we are capable of defending ourselves," she said, her voice firm. "Now we need to prove that we are willing to lead, to unite the galaxy under one banner of peace." Alanthar studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "And what does that peace look like, Ambassador? The galaxy is fractured. The Syndicate's remnants still whisper of rebellion, and your own people are torn between ideals of diplomacy and dominance." Sarah's heart tightened. She had always known this day would come, the moment when humanity would have to choose. Power had its price. "It's not about domination," she said, her voice steady. "It's about unity. It's about forging a new path forward, one that doesn't rely on war or fear, but on cooperation and mutual respect. We need a galaxy where no one is left behind." Alanthar's eyes flickered with something, whether it was approval or skepticism. Sarah couldn't tell. "And how do you plan to convince the others?" "The Council is divided. Some will never accept Earth's rise without resistance." Sarah felt the weight of his words. She knew this wasn't just about rhetoric, it was about action. The syndicate's influence had been dealt a blow, but there were still pockets of resistance. The galaxy's power structures had been in place for millennia. Changing them would take more than idealism. It would take leadership. "We start with trust," Sarah said, her voice gaining strength. "We call for a new treaty, a federation of free worlds, one where every species has an equal voice. We'll lead by example, showing that peace doesn't require dominance, only collaboration. And if we have to fight for that collaboration, then we will." Alanthar's gaze remained impassive. "And what will you do when the galaxy resists? What if your vision of peace crumbles under the weight of war?" "Then we'll fight," Sarah replied without hesitation. "But we will fight for something worth protecting. A galaxy where everyone has the chance to thrive, not just the powerful few." Alanthar's expression shifted just slightly. "You are bold, Ambassador. More than I had expected." He paused, considering her words. "The Varthal will support this vision, but be warned. The path you are choosing is fraught with danger. The Syndicate is not the only threat you face. You will have to confront not just your enemies, but your own allies who will question your methods." Sarah nodded, understanding the gravity of his warning. She knew that the hardest part wasn't over. It was just beginning. "As long as we stay true to our purpose," she said, "we will find a way to succeed." Alanthar stood silently for a moment, then gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. "We shall see." With that, he turned and left the room, leaving Sarah alone with the weight of the decision she had made. The galaxy was shifting, and humanity's role in that shift was clear. Whether it would rise to lead or fall into the chaos that so many feared was still unknown. But Sarah knew one thing for certain. Humanity had taken the first step toward something greater. And there was no turning back now.